The great bike boom was going bust, though no one seemed to know that catastrophe was lurking around the corner. I certainly didn't. Completely ignorant of what was going on around me, I opened the brilliantly named Bill's Bike Shop on June 1st, 1974, probably the day the second great American bike boom ended. From the late 1960s to the early 1970s, importers in the U.S. sent huge orders to bicycle factories around the world. The bicycle industry struggled to fill the insatiable American demand for two-wheeled transport. Across town from my shop was the Camarillo Bicycle Center, a busy and well-stocked shop, owned by a charming, middle-aged man whom I knew only as Chuck. He had all the famous imported lightweights, among them Peugeot, Motobecane and Raleigh, but his top-selling brand was Nishiki, made in Japan. Chuck had populated my town with hundreds and hundreds, possibly thousands, of bright orange Nishiki Olympic bikes, Nishiki's basic consumer 10-speed. Chuck said his Nishikis were not only a terrific value and well made, they were equipped with wonderfully reliable, cutting-edge derailleurs. He was adamant that Nishiki bikes shouldn't be confused with the shoddy, post-war Japanese merchandise everyone thought was junk. My starting inventory was lean, just 10 French Gitan 10-speeds and 25 Maserati bicycles. The Maseratis were made in Italy by a member of the famous car family who used the legendary name to brand his bikes. I told customers my European bikes were light, handled best, and were the product of a cycling culture that demanded good riding bikes. Being 22 and sorely lacking judgment, I heaped contempt upon Chuck's Nishikis, calling them Jap scrap. I felt righteous selling my French and Italian bikes, and succeeded well enough that about 6 months after I opened my shop, I attended Camarillo Bicycle Center's bankruptcy auction. The bike boom was by now long gone, and there wasn't enough room for all of us. But I was wrong, and Chuck was right. How that came to be and what followed is my story. Going back to cycling's beginning, it was a Frenchman, Pierre Lamont, who invented the true bicycle. He had seen what we now call a dressine, which looked much like a modern bicycle, and importantly, it could be steered with a tiller that allowed the rider to turn the front wheel. The rider sat on the saddle and walked or ran down the road with his weight supported by the dressine saddle. Lamont pondered the device and had the brilliant insight to put pedals on a crank and put that crank on the front wheel. Now living in Paris, and with the help of fellow shop workers, his idea was turned into a working machine. Voila! The bicycle, then weighing 70 pounds, was born. Inventors kept improving Lamont's invention. The big change came in 1885 when Englishman John Kemp Starley revolutionized the bicycle industry. He created the modern chain-drive to rear-wheel safety bicycle with equal-sized front and rear wheels. Now there was a bike everyone could ride. Before the First World War, French inventors had already developed practical production rear derailleurs, gear changers. Joanny Panel's 1911 Le Cheminot, the tramp derailleur, solved all the fundamental problems plaguing earlier gear change system designers, and was sufficiently advanced that Panel was able to produce and sell the same basic design until 1949. The initial invention of the bicycle, and most of the improvements needed to make it a practical, everyman's means of transportation, were done by Europeans. The United States of the late 19th and early 20th centuries also enjoyed a vigorous bicycle industry. German immigrant Ignaz Schwinn started his now legendary Schwinn Bicycle Company in Chicago in the 1890s. The bikes Americans bought into the 1960s were products of the West. Then, in 1963, pricing pressures forced the Western auto store chain to equip its 3-speed bikes with Shimano hubs. That was the first major original equipment purchased by an American manufacturer. It would not be the last. Other low-end makers quickly jumped on the low-cost Japanese parts bandwagon, and soon Japan was exporting $100 million a year worth of bike parts to the U.S. Sometime in my second year in the shop, my Peugeot sales representative was hired by Mitchell Weiner's Western States Imports. He offered me the firm's Centurion bikes, made in Japan. I hesitated because I had based my entire business on the superiority of the European cycling culture. Selling Centurions would be a sharp break. I tried a few of Centurion's basic model, the Le Mans. The aluminum collarless cranks, Sun Tour derailleurs, and Diacomp center pull brakes were mounted on straight frames with good paint jobs. I was able to assemble them quickly and found they worked flawlessly. Very quickly, my sales floor was covered with Centurions. My experience with Japanese and later other Asian countries' bikes was replicated all over the country. So, please come along as I tell the story of why your bike is made in Asia, my career in bicycles as I watched two continents squander an industry. The book is available in print, Kindle ebook, and audiobook versions from Amazon.